Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching Gulf Today on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories of the hour. Israel reports it knows the locations of 9 out of 13 deceased hostages still held in the Gaza Strip. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will also decide which countries can join any international force entering Gaza. Amid reports, Pakistani troops could be part of stabilization mission. A Turkish court has issued a new arrest order for Istanbul's jailed mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu on suspicion of political espionage, state media says. The opposition leader, a top rival to President Erdogan, has been in custody since March and was recently sentenced for insulting the Istanbul prosecutor. Israeli strikes in southern Lebanon kill 3 people, including Hezbollah operatives accused of smuggling weapons from Syria. The attacks mark another breach in the year-old ceasefire as tensions along the border continue to rise. UN peacekeepers in southern Lebanon come under fire from Israeli forces, according to local officials. No casualties are reported, but the incident raises new fears of escalation in a region already on edge. The Kurdish PKK says it is withdrawing all remaining forces from Turkish territory into northern Iraq. The group calls on Ankara to pass legal reforms to protect a fragile peace process and allow its members into democratic politics. The United States and China have agreed a framework for a potential trade deal to be finalized when Presidents Donald Trump and Xi Jinping meet this week in South Korea. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says the plan includes a TikTok agreement, a deferral of China's rare earth restrictions, and no 100% tariff hike as Beijing resumes large soybean purchases. China says H-6K bombers conducted simulated confrontation drills near Taiwan ahead of this week's Trump-Xi meeting in South Korea. Beijing claims the self-ruled island as its own, though Taipei says it has not seen unusual military activity recently. US President Donald Trump leaves Malaysia for the second leg of his Asia tour, with Air Force One departing Kuala Lumpur for Tokyo. He will meet Japan's new Prime Minister, Sinai Taikiche, on Tuesday. Brazil's President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva says US President Donald Trump has assured him a trade agreement can be reached to ease punitive tariffs. Lula spoke after meeting Trump on the sidelines of a Southeast ASEAN summit. Now, according to reports, Israel does not know the location of 4 of the remaining 13 bodies of hostages held in Gaza. This comes amid increased pressure on Hamas to resume handing over bodies in accordance with the terms of the ceasefire and hostage deal. Meanwhile, Israel has insisted that it will maintain control of security inside Gaza, despite signing up to the ceasefire agreement that foresees the deployment of an international security force in the region. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has told ministers Israel would decide for itself and when to strike its foes and which countries would be allowed to send troops to police the truce. Under a US-brokered ceasefire between Hamas and Israel, a coalition of mainly Arab and Muslim powers is expected to deploy troops in the devastated Palestinian territory. Now we move on to some further updates. Meanwhile, according to reports, defense officials have told Israeli lawmakers that the international force that will help stabilize Gaza is likely to include troops from Pakistan. Members of the Knesset Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee were reportedly told during a closed-door briefing last week that the International Stabilization Force will be made up of soldiers from Indonesia, Azerbaijan and Pakistan. Indonesia has publicly offered to send troops for the effort, and officials have told the media that Azerbaijan had also agreed to contribute soldiers. However, the potential presence of Pakistani soldiers has not yet been officially announced. We're now joined by Dr. Punsara Amarasinghe from Kotawala Defence University, located in Colombo, Sri Lanka. Dr. Amarasinghe, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World and discussing this ongoing situation in West Asia. Of course, the search continues for the 13 deceased hostages in the Gaza Strip, a major sticking point and contentious point here in this ceasefire process. Israel says it knows the location of 9 of these hostages. 4 remain unknown. What does this say about the strength of the Israeli intelligence service inside the Gaza Strip?
I think it's a question beyond doubt that there is a tremendous imperative of returning the dead bodies of the hostages to Israel. As you know, that the proper burial stands as one of the central aspects of Judaism. So they consider that once you are dead, it is highly sacred to connect your body to the soil. So I don't find any high enthusiasm or any reasons, any overaction behind Israel's zest in terms of returning those dead bodies. But then again, as for the question you raised, yes, with regard to the capabilities of the intelligence, Israeli intelligence estimated the number of the dead victims of those who were staying in Gaza as hostages under the custody of Hamas. But still, there were certain complexities about their whereabouts. To answer that question, you need to look at the infrastructure facilities and the city itself in depth. Even though we look Gaza as a completely dusty ground, and the hostages were detained under the tunnel network, right? And only the shadowy unit of the Hamas organization were providing the protection to those hostages. So in terms of the intelligence assessment, yes, you are correct that Israeli intelligence did not have the comprehensive set of information about the whereabouts of the dead bodies of those hostages. So that remains a huge problem. So, but in order to bolster and continue the ceasefire brokered by President Trump on the 9th of October, it is duty of Hamas to return and assist Israeli authorities to find out the dead bodies as a rule of thumb, right? Because if Hamas is not going to cooperate with the authorities of Israel, definitely this ceasefire agreement can be deteriorated at any moment.
Yes, and Dr. Amarasinghe, moving on to Benjamin Netanyahu's statement that he has made today. He has insisted, contradictory to the ceasefire agreement, which has his signature on it, that Israel will maintain control of security inside Gaza, despite putting his signature on that dotted line. What do you think US President Donald Trump is going to think of that? Of course, this follows some annoyance from US government officials, especially after that controversial Knesset vote where they passed that bill of the annexation of the West Bank. Some vocal annoyance from top-level US government officials, and following this, there's sure to be a reaction. What are your thoughts?
But I think my thoughts are quite simple. You need to clearly understand that the disarming Hamas stood as the primary objective of the ceasefire agreement brokered by President Trump on the 9th of October. But now if you look at the leadership of Hamas, they keep insisting that in order to disarm Hamas organization, they want to see Israeli occupation completely out of order. But we need to understand what exactly they mean by occupation. Are they going to refer to the state of Israel as a whole, or else Israel's presence in Judea and Samaria, or else in Gaza? So it remains completely ambiguous about their stances. So with all these trajectories, I don't think so it's rational to believe that the Israeli will step down from its military activities surrounding Gaza. So that is one of the most important factors. Even the President Trump himself has clearly stated pretty recently that he's quite appalled by the lethargy of Hamas organization in terms of the disarmament. So disarming Hamas is the #1 priority to vitalize every aspect of the ceasefire agreement. At the same time, we should not forget that there is a kind of a stir going on that of the involvement of the foreign troops to rebuilding Gaza, right? So there is a kind of a negotiation whether Pakistanis would be included in this rebuilding process. At the moment, I think you clearly mentioned Indonesia and Azerbaijan have acknowledged that they would be participating in the process, but there is a kind of a quite twilight side from Islamabad.
Yes, and Indonesia, Azerbaijan, Pakistan. We've also had Turkey, of course. That's been a name that's been in the conversation. How do you assess those names as possible candidates for being on the ground in Gaza and being there alongside Israeli troops while Gaza is reconstructed and stabilized?
Well, I think in accordance with the 20 plan, the 20 resolutions made by President Trump, if you look at the candidates on the list, countries such as Azerbaijan and Indonesia can be possible actors who can play a crucial role in terms of rebuilding Gaza. Even if you look at Azerbaijan has been maintaining a very good rapport with Tel Aviv in the recent past. But I have my second thoughts about Pakistan that has to be understood as a ground reality. Because if you look at the diplomatic relations between the two states since the inception of their nation states in 1947 and 1948, Pakistan had maintained quite a hostile approach to Israel. And when Israel was on the way of independence, when the United Nations appointed the Committee of the Partition, Pakistan blocked it at the United Nations. And during the Six-Day War in 1967, it was reported that one of the Pakistani pilots had shot down an aircraft of Israel. Right? So there is the diplomatic stances between the two countries. So I think that will be quite a big question mark if Pakistan enters the game.
Okay, Dr. Amarasinghe, do stay with us. We have further updates from the region. The Israel Defense Force says it has killed 3 Hezbollah operatives in Israeli strikes carried out in southern Lebanon. The IDF announced that the strikes targeted Ali Hussein al-Massam, responsible for weapons purchasing and smuggling between Syria and Lebanon for Hezbollah, and Abd Mahmoud al-Sayed, who acted as Hezbollah's local representative to residents of al-Bayada. The strikes come amid ongoing tensions along the Israel-Lebanon border and violations of the November 2024 ceasefire. According to reports, the operation coincided with a visit by Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz to the Lebanon border, where he was accompanied by US Deputy Envoy to the Middle East, Morgan Ortagus. Katz's office also said that IDF commanders briefed both individuals on the strikes during their tour. Now, Dr. Amarasinghe, of course, this ceasefire has been in effect since last November. However, we have seen countless strikes by the Israeli Defense Forces into mainly southern Lebanon, where we have seen multiple fatalities, where Israel have claimed to have taken out Hezbollah operatives across the region. Does this not completely destroy the ceasefire that was signed in November? And why isn't this escalating more why isn't this escalating more?
I think the ceasefire has been completely fragile since it came into effect. And you need to fathom the whole context based on the strategies adopted by Tel Aviv towards Hezbollah. And we need to understand there has been a major shift of Israeli strategy towards Hezbollah, which is a kind of a paradigm shift. They were initially taking deterrence policy, but now, after 2024, mainly since the inception of the ceasefire agreement, they have been adopting quite a dual approach, right? So they are maintaining the ceasefire agreement. At the same time, simultaneously, they are systematically degrading the group's military capabilities through targeted strikes. So what you are discussing today is simply an offshoot of this targeted strike policy adopted by Israel. So this is a kind of a rule of thumb, and they continue through the persisting strikes, and also they have debilitated the Iranian influence over the region. And Hezbollah completely has lost its military capacity for the past few months, especially since the assassination of its leader, and even the current assassinations, the targeted killings are adding one more brick to the downfall of Hezbollah. And also, we should not forget the fact that Tehran is not in a proper stable position to back its allies to sustain their military glories.
Some great insights there. Dr. Pansara Amarasinghe, thank you very much for taking the time and joining us. We now stay once again in the region where in Lebanon, the United Nations peacekeeping mission UNIFIL says one of its patrol came under Israeli fire near the village of Kirafila. According to UNIFIL, an Israeli drone dropped a bomb close to the patrol, followed moments later by tank fire. No injuries nor damage were reported, however. The mission condemned the incident as a violation of UN Resolution 1701 and Lebanon's sovereignty, warning it puts peacekeepers at risk. This comes as Israeli strikes continue across southern and eastern Lebanon, despite a ceasefire. We now move on to some further updates, where the Kurdish militant faction, the PKK, has announced a withdrawal of all its forces from Turkey, moving the fighters to North Iraq. This comes as a peace plan begins implementation to normalize the affected regions in Turkey as the Kurdish militants step up their demands for a separate government. One of the key demands made by the PKK is the release of their jailed leader, Abdullah Öcalan, a founding member of the PKK who has been in Turkish prison for over 25 years now. Listen in to the announcement of the withdrawal made by PKK leadership.
ام همه هزن خوین لناف سینورین ترکیه لجین کو ریسکا پفچون چه دکه و ری لبر پرووکاسیون محتمل بده که جبا پیکانینا بکشاندنا لقادم پاراستنا مدیای لسار ارکیلان ریبر عبدالله öcalanji ام پکتینن.
Meanwhile, Kurdish fighters have said that securing the release of the jailed founder of PKK is crucial for the success of the emerging peace process with Turkey. Let's take a listen.
Tamamen önderliğin özgürlüğü çok önemli. Çünkü yani tecrit altında ve mesela bir hapishane koşullarında böyle bir sürecin, böyle çok önemli bir sürecin yürütülmesi çok zordur. Ki bunu da yapıyor önderlik. Fakat yani önderliğin özgürlüğü bu sürecin daha güçlü yürümesi için çok önemlidir.
Okay, we're now joined by Colonel Sanjit Saroli. He's an international relations and defence expert, and he joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much for joining us, Colonel Saroli, here on NewsX World. Let's start off. One of the key demands made by PKK is the release of the leader, Abdullah Öcalan, who's been in prison for over 25 years. What would be the significance of this?
Thomas must understand that this was the major demand of the PKK, that is the Kurdistan Workers' Party. And they have been demanding this for long years. But the Turkey government was not interested in releasing him. But in March, when Abdullah Öcalan declared that we will have ceasefire with Turkey, that is when the process started off. And in May, it was also decided that the PKK will be disarmed and disbanded once they have been promised by the Turkey government that they will be converted into a democratic process. So I think in July, this outlaw group, which is designated as a terrorist organization, started talking about, and they burned their weapons as a symbolic gesture to tell to the Turkey government that they are interested in disarmament and they will leave Turkey provided the PKK is accepted as a democratic party and the PKK is allowed to fight elections in Turkey and Abdullah Öcalan is released from the jail. So now the ball is in the Turkey government court whether they accept it or not, because as far as this PKK is concerned, they have decided to disarm themselves and they have decided to move from Turkey to Iran. Now the ball is in Turkey government. What they want to decide, if they accept this demand and they release Abdullah Öcalan, then I think the peace will prevail and it will be better for the complete area, that including the Syria, Iraq and Iran, because PKK have got their offshoots in all these three countries. Thomas.
Colonel Saroli, is there any other leverage that the PKK have over Turkey?
the only leverage they have is because when they established themselves, they started off with the Marxist-Leninist guerrilla warfare, and initially it was not accepted by even the Kurdish people. But later on, when the Kurdish people realized that they were being marginalized by the Turkey government, that is the time they also accepted their guerrilla warfare. So I don't think there is any leverage. The leverage is only that if Turkey releases Dr. Abdullah Öcalan, then only the peace will prevail. Otherwise, the peace will not prevail. And even the United States have been supporting PKK against the ISIS a few years back. So I think it is very, very important that firstly, they were told to disarm themselves. They have disarmed themselves. Then they were told to leave Turkey. They have left Turkey. Now the only thing is left is that now the Turkey government has to accept it, and they have to release Dr. Abdullah. And after that, I think the peace will prevail. Otherwise, this insurgency is again going to start off.
Colonel Sarohi, thank you very much for bringing your insight here to NewsX World. It's a pleasure to have you on the programme. We now move on over more Turkish matters, and a court has issued a new arrest for Istanbul's jailed mayor, Ekrem İmamoğlu, accusing him of political espionage. State media says İmamoğlu, a leading rival of President Tayyip Erdogan, is already in prison on separate corruption charges and a jail sentence for allegedly insulting a top prosecutor. The opposition leader has rejected all accusations, calling them lies, slander and conspiracy. Authorities have also arrested two others, including Meran Yanardag, editor-in-chief of the opposition TV channel Tele 1, which was seized by the state last week. Turkey's main opposition party, the CHP, says the charges are politically motivated, part of a wider effort to silence critics and weaken the opposition ahead of future elections. Now we move on to another story where British journalist Sami Hamdi has reportedly been detained by US federal authorities and had his visa revoked by the USA.